Those leaders at the moment are conferring on Capitol Hill with members of Congress, pointing up the aims of the rally.
By far, the most dominant religion in the United States during the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 60s was Christianity. According to a Gallup poll in 1960, 67 Americans were Protestant and 25 were Catholic. Especially in the South, both white and black cultures were heavily rooted in Christianity. During the 19th century, Christianity played a central role in the slavery debate. Opponents of abolition argued that the Bible condoned slavery, saying that the children of Israel themselves were slaveholders and were not condemned for it. Many Southerners responded to the abolition of slavery by creating the Ku Klux Klan, which was originally based on local Protestant communities and led by ex-Confederate veterans. Supporters of abolition and black civil rights used the Bible to argue that slavery violated Christian principles and natural rights of all people. Christian abolitionists also wanted to prove that biblical slavery and American slavery were different. For example, they argued that biblical slaves had access to basic civil rights while American slaves didn't. When the Supreme Court overturned the concept of separate but equal in Brown v. Board of Education, white Southerners fought ferociously to maintain white supremacy.
I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
In an attempt to battle this resistance, the Civil Rights Movement was born. A symbolic figure of this movement was Martin Luther King Jr. King was responsible for organizing the most famous campaigns of the era, including the Montgomery bus boycott and the March on Washington, where he gave his legendary "I Have a Dream" speech. After the successful end of Montgomery bus boycott, King helped found Southern Christian Leadership Conference. With the SCLC, King advocated the greater social and political activism of churches in the South in the form of boycotts and nonviolent civil disobedience. However, black leaders in the South believed that segregation should not be challenged with direct action, as it might cause unwanted violence. Also, many believed that the role of the church should be confined to a spiritual one and opposed to the activity of King and the SCLC. The white Christian community also contributed to both sides of the movement. Just like their predecessors had during the 1800s, most Southern Christians weren't opposed to segregation and resented those who viewed segregation as an immoral way of life. They rejected efforts to promote equality and freedom and formed various organizations to keep their churches segregated. Also, when schools became integrated, white Christians in the South abandoned the public schools in favor of private schools funded by their churches. With the birth of the Civil Rights Movement also came the revival of terror organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, which, like before, used Christian symbols to represent themselves. These groups threatened black communities and prevented them from participating in the movement. In an act of white supremacist terrorism, the KKK infamously bombed and destroyed the African-American 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 girls and injuring 22 others. Because of the threat posed by the white supremacists, and because of the disagreements among black leaders about how civil rights should be approached, The SCLC initially struggled to gain support from black communities, but as time went on, King's followers grew. Activists used church as a place to gather and organize campaigns across the South. Churches became a sanctuary for black people where they could express themselves freely about civil rights. King's campaign even attracted Jewish leaders like Rabbi Abraham, Joshua Heschel, who fought with King against racism and inspired Jewish communities nationwide to fight for their own rights. The civil rights movement grew from a movement for black people to a movement for all oppressed people in the United States. However, not everybody agreed with Martin Luther King's methodology of nonviolent civil disobedience. King and the SCLC were often criticized for lack of militancy. One of these critics was Malcolm in America and the United States. Malcolm X used his position as a minister and his powerful dramatic language to empower the Black Power movement in the 60s.
Just as Uncle Tom back during slavery used to keep the Negroes from resisting the Bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attack of the
Unlike Christian teachings, which had a relatively moderate view on the relationship between white and black people, the teachings of the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm X in particular, took a rather radical perspective, going as far as to preach that black people were genetically superior to white people. Malcolm X once said, "Thoughtful white people know they are inferior to black people. Anyone who has studied the genetic phase of biology knows that white is considered recessive and black is considered dominant." The strong language and the radical claims that Malcolm X used appealed especially to the younger generation of activists, who denounced nonviolence as inaction. Religion played a central role in the civil rights movement, which shared many similarities with the anti-slavery movement in particular. Christianity was used as arguments for both sides of the debate. Some used tradition in religion to resist change, while others embraced change in the name of religion. And finally, religious organizations provided an effective means of communication of a very large audience, which helped expand the civil rights movement altogether.